Hello, Hypno LA. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I have the pleasure today to be interviewing the fabulous Garry Coles. For those of you who don't know Garry, Garry is a clinical hypnotherapist. He's got over 20 years experience working specifically within a clinical setting. The NHS in the UK, those of you who've heard of the great National Health Service, he's been helping people advise people within cancer and oncology from a hypnotherapy standpoint. And he's going to be joining us at Hypno LA to present Hypnotic Interventions, the Cancer Journey, and Hypno-Oncology. So great to have you here, Garry, to tell us all about this.
Hello, thanks for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to being in LA. It's a long time since I've been there.
When was the last time you were there?
I had a rough idea, and I think it's probably 30 years ago.
Wow. Time flies.
In fact, I know exactly when it was, because the night I was in a dodgy West Hollywood club, the night Princess Diana died. So
Wow.
it was that long ago. That was when I was last there.
Wow.
For people that don't know me, my hobby, I'm very much into my rock music and rock scene. And I was actually in LA for that because I had this idea as I wanted to see LA Guns, who were the forerunners to Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
I wanted to see LA Guns in LA, and that's what I was there for.
Wow. 30 years, crazy. Well, it's great to have you back. Awesome. Yeah, if you like a bit of rock music, I'm sure you'll catch up with Garry at the event. But yeah, so you're going to be presenting on Hypno-Oncology. So tell us, for the people who come to your talk specifically, who are at Hypno LA, what are going to be the takeaways that they're going to take with them that they can start utilizing in their practice after your presentation?
The main thing is that if you're going to be involved in working with cancer patients, the first thing you need to do is understand the whole journey that patient is going through, because it's not necessarily quite as you think. And so we're going to teach you all about the journey, all about the treatments that they will encounter, and all the lifestyle changes, literally their whole journey from their point of view, but also the medical point of view. And one of the reasons that I sort of put training together in this area was I met, because it's an area I studied for my master's, but I met and I spent over 20 years in hospital, or 19 years in hospital in an oncology unit. But because I did my research and it got known, I had a few hypnotherapists who were very well qualified, very experienced, would contact me and say, "Oh, I've got a friend or wife or husband, family member that have got cancer. What can I do?" And people just seem to freeze up and panic and not really know what to do. So I put training together, but in this part, it's an introduction to it. You're going to understand the patient's journey from both the patient's point of view and the medical point of view. You understand how cancer is graded and staged and things like that, so you know where they are in their journey. And then we're going to give you an idea of what you can work with throughout that entire journey. And we're going to give you a lot of tips and ideas, so that really you can go out and be confident on working with people going through the cancer journey. So I think that's going to be the big takeaway, is you'll understand their journey and be confident to work with people going through that journey.
I think it's recently, becoming more and more apparent, especially with like cancer is such a big thing. I mean, it impacted my life a couple of years ago with my mum, and yeah, unfortunately she passed away. But I think that there's a really interesting thing in the world of change work. And there are certain claims out there, but I remember having a pragmatic conversation with you because, I mean, it impacts the people, it impacts the people's families, like it's a broader context. So when you're sort of working with people, like, I mean, I'm going to guess you can't fix anything, but there's things that you can help to mitigate and work with. So what's your sort of perspective on those kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is, and in the UK, we have a 1939 Cancer Act. And in the UK, we are not allowed to work with cancer, advise on cancer, on their treatment or treat it. That's the first thing. So we're working with their journey. Now, I see a lot of people, particularly in the US, that are claiming they can cure cancer with hypnotherapy. In my ideas, that's completely unethical. We do get spontaneous remissions. They happen. But to then say, oh, it was the hypnotherapy that got rid of it. You know, I hear so many people saying that cancer is caused by stress or traumatic events. So if we go back and deal with the traumatic event, then the cancer will go away. Show me the evidence. Yeah, we do get spontaneous remissions, but there is no evidence to show that hypnotherapy can work with the cancer. So we do not work with the cancer. We work with the patient going through the journey. From that point of view, it's the whole journey. So the first time I might see somebody is they might have just been diagnosed. So they're in panic mode, stressed, anxious, worried. So we'll work with that side of things. Then the next side of things, there might be fears and phobias. They might be frightened of going into scanners, having needles, surgery. So we will work with that. An area I did research in for my master's degree, I did a lot of research into pre and post surgical hypnosis. And there is evidence that pre and post surgical hypnosis gives them a better recovery quality. So we can deal with that. The biggest area I probably work with is side effects of treatment, whether that's chemotherapy or radiotherapy. So the common things you work with is perhaps things like neuropathy, taste issues, sleep issues. Probably the number one thing is anticipatory nausea, for example. So we would deal with all those types of things moving through. Obviously, one of the biggest areas with hypnotherapy that's been researched properly is pain control. So we will work with hypnotic pain control. We deal with some palliative care. Now, in the UK, we have a very good hospice set up, and I'm hospital based. So although I work with palliative care, I don't work with end of life care typically, because they move on to the hospice environment, although I have worked with some end of life care. We would then work with people after recovery, or sort of how their life has changed. So they might want to learn how to adapt to how their life is going to be now they've been through the cancer journey. Sometimes it's a wake-up call for people. Oh, I've got this addiction, or I've had this problem. So they want to change that. And there is one experimental area that I work with, which we touch on. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's psychoneuroimmunology, and that is the scientific study of how feelings and emotions affect the immune system. Now, it is interesting that there is scientific evidence to support that. That feelings, emotions affect the immune system. For example, if somebody's very depressed and down, quite often they'll catch a cold or something because their immune system is depleted. Now, by the same token, we know that talking therapy, such as hypnotherapy, can help with feelings and emotions. So if you take that full circle, theoretically, we should be able to change the immune system by working with hypnotherapy. And there is actually there is an evidence base behind that. I come from a very scientific evidence-based background, and there is an evidence base to support that. So although, again, because we're not allowed to work with cancer as such, I do experimental work with the immune system for people going through that journey. So that's all the sort of things that we're going to cover.
I think that's awesome, and I think it's really powerful, because you think of like just someone's having cancer, and you've got like there's so many facets to it. And I think it's really beautiful you share all the different potential applications, because I don't work within that specific area, but if I ever had a client in that area, I personally would feel quite overwhelmed. But the way that you just sort of decompartmentalize, it's actually, well, there's lots of different areas we can work on to help and support this person with what they're going through. So I think it's really, really powerful stuff. But how did you fall into this kind of work? How did you end up getting to where you are now?
A bit of an accident, really. So we'll go through that. But the one thing I will add on that, sort of when you can't compartmentalize it, the number one question, and the reason I started teaching hypno-oncology, was hypnotherapists coming to me saying, I've got somebody, close to me. What can I do? What can I do for them? And it sounds a bit of a trite answer, but my number one thing on that one is, have you asked them what they would like you to do for them? What they would like to help with? Don't assume that you want to work with pain control or the immune system. Ask them what they would like you to help them with. So that's the first thing. But yeah, how I got into oncology was really sort of the journey of how I got into hypnotherapy generally, I think. If somebody had said to me sort of 20 something years ago, sort of 6 months before I become a hypnotherapist, that you will be a hypnotherapist, I'd have probably laughed at them and said, not a chance in hell. I was one of these skeptical people that didn't really believe in it, and so on. And I always joke and say it was an obvious transition. But my career, I was an IT consultant in the oil industry. So I had a maths and computer science background. So that's why I come from things very science-based, if you like. So that was my background. The company I was working for, there was lots of consolidation in the oil industry. So I thought at some stage, I'm probably going to lose my job. I was a bit savvy about it, I insured against being made redundant. And when I was made redundant, the company gave me a good payoff, and I got a good payoff from the insurance company. So I was in a position where I didn't have to work for a couple of years. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do now? And the only thing I knew was IT. And I thought, well, the one thing I did decide was I was going to work for myself, but didn't really know what or in what area. I thought about websites and things like that, and I'm glad I didn't, because every man and his dog's doing that now, and AI can do it as well. So I'm glad about that. But at the time, I had no real idea, and I actually set up a web store for Christmas. I built a web store, and I was selling books. And then Christmas came and went, and I thought, what do I sell in January? And somebody out of the blue, somebody offered me a job lot of hypnosis CDs for weight loss, smoking, stress, sleep, and so. And it sold really well. They all sold really well, and that piqued my interest in it a bit more. And like as teenagers, we buy books on all sorts of rubbish that get sort of stuck at the back of the cabinet. And I did have a couple of books on hypnosis, and I thought, oh, I'm quite intrigued. I'll go and have a look at them. And I looked at them, and I thought, no, I still don't believe in this really. But then I happened to see a doctor of psychology locally was doing an introductory course. So I thought, I'll go along and have a look, out of curiosity. So I went along and had a look. And again, I saw him hypnotizing people, and I thought, oh, that's brilliant. But I thought, it's not real. And I said I was really skeptical. And one of the things that this doctor said was, he said, I'm going to work for half a day with everybody to deal with the problem, to prove how powerful it is. And he came to me and he said, what would you like help with? And I said, well, I'm quite happy. I don't think I've really got any problems that I need working with. And he said, there must be something. And to me, it wasn't a problem as such, because I'd always had it. But I used to suffer from nightmares. So 3 or 4 or 5 nights a week, I would wake up, punching, kicking, shouting, realize it was a nightmare, turn over and go back to sleep. But because I'd always done it, it was normal to me. And he just said, okay, we'll work with that. And he explained to me all the things that we were going to do. It was going to be parts work, it was going to be ideomotor responses, and visualize this, that, and the other. And one thing that I think made a difference that I didn't realize at the time, that I've learned since, is I'm amphantasic. That's people that cannot visualize. I cannot visualize at all. And so I just thought that was normal. I didn't realize that it wasn't normal. And so anyway, he told me we'd do all this stuff. And all the stuff he did, of course, I couldn't visualize. So to me, nothing was happening. And I was unresponsive with IMR movements. Parts work, again, because I couldn't visualize, nothing much happened. And we spent this whole session, and we finished off. He said, what do you think? And I said, well, to be totally honest, I said, I know, I was skeptical. I said, I'm now even more skeptical, because I said, basically, as far as I'm concerned, I was sitting there out of respect for you, just keeping my eyes shut out of respect to you, to see what happened. And I said, as far as I'm concerned, nothing whatsoever happened. I said, because that the fingers didn't work, this didn't work, I didn't visualize it, nothing happened. And he just said, okay, that's fine, just see how you go. And I think I was sitting at home about 4 or 6 weeks later, and I was just sitting there, and I thought, I haven't had a nightmare since I've had that session. So there must be something in it. So I thought, okay, I'm curious now. So I went and did just a basic diploma, because I thought perhaps I'll just do a bit on the side. So I did the basic diploma, and then just lots of weird things happened. I think it was about a couple of weeks afterwards. I had a phone call from the hospital, and they said, somebody's just told us that you've qualified as a hypnotherapist. We used to have one in the cancer unit at the hospital, and they've gone, and it's really good. Would you like to come in and sort of give us some time at the hospital? And I was being a bit mercenary at that time. So I thought, well, actually, I've now qualified. I need experience. They're offering me something like 8 patients a day to work with, sort of the days I'm in. So I thought, I'll go in, do that, do a couple of weeks, and then disappear once I've got my experience. And that didn't quite work like that, because I was still there 19 years later. And but in that time, it was only sort of half to 1 day a week. But I probably worked with about 2,500 to 3,000 cancer patients. Then I had a chance to study for a master's degree in clinical hypnosis, and it was a research master's. So I decided to make it really difficult for myself and do medical research. So the actual research that I did was I did a study into pre-surgical hypnosis and the effects that had on the recovery quality in breast cancer operations, and was able to demonstrate that it did, and how and why. And that sort of got me known a little bit. So I started getting people phoning me up or emailing me saying, oh, you're a bit of an expert, we're working with cancer patients, can you give me some advice? And then a few people said, oh, you need to put a course together. And I thought, nobody's going to be interested in that. And And then I was invited to a couple of podcast interviews, so I was getting more emails. And then I did the inaugural UK Hypnosis Convention, and then I was asked to do a big one in Vegas, and now I do about 10 a year all over the world. I keep getting invited back, and I did put a training course together, and I've got one book on it, and I'm doing another book. And yeah, I go around and talk about it, as I will be in LA, and I teach both online and in person. I mean, recently I was teaching nurses in Iceland. I'm going to be teaching doctors and nurses and hypnotherapists in Poland in a few weeks, and then doing some in the US in Vegas. So it's sort of taken on a life of its own, really.
Amazing. And I think it's really, truly beautiful how these sort of journeys unfold. So many people I speak to within this space, it's not necessarily where they start. Not everybody necessarily purposefully goes that way. The things just start to unfold. And it's really great to have your breadth of experience. And also, yeah, not many people work within this area. So it's super exciting to have you with us in LA. So my question to you, well, first of all, you're coming back to LA. Do you have any specific plans? Anything that you've got to go see, got to go do? You're going to do some sightseeing while you're in LA?
Yes, I am. The one thing that's actually on my list, and it comes back to my rock music sort of fan stuff, is I've got to go and have my photograph taken with the Lemmy statue at the Rainbow Bar and Grill. That's what I've decided. That's going to be my priority.
I love it. That's
Sunset.
amazing. Well, if any of you know LA well, know any good rock people playing or any bands, do let Garry know. But I've got one final question before we leave for today, Garry. So obviously you've got a whole wealth of experience. You've got lots of different stuff. For somebody in the industry, somebody working in this field, what's maybe a snippet, a nugget, something that you want to offer to the people who are doing this work right now? What advice would you give them?
I think, well, it's actually, I mention it actually in my talk and in my training. It's always, I get people, particularly newer people, to ask, can you give me some advice? And my typical ones that I do, there's 3 or 4 bits that I've got. Number one is always have a plan B, C, and D. So that if plan A doesn't work, you've got a plan B and a plan C. Always make the client or the patient think that whatever happened in the session was what was meant to happen, even if it goes horribly wrong. So you do plan A, it goes horribly wrong, move to plan B, but make sure that that was what they thought was supposed to happen. So that's one. I always used to think that confidence was the number one thing you needed, but I've now changed that over some things that have happened in the last couple of years. And I would say intent is the number one thing that you need, but the confidence to back that up. And the thing that brought that up to me was I did a regression session with somebody over Zoom, and and they pulled the microphone out just at the point that they got back to regress to that point in time. And rather than aborting it, I did the whole session based on their facial expressions. They could see me, but I couldn't hear them. And then we finished off, and I said, "Oh, can you just check your microphone?" And they told me that I'd absolutely smashed the session, dealt with everything was processed, and so on. And that was purely done on facial expressions rather than actually any information whatsoever. So because I was confident enough that I could do it, and I had the intent that it was going to happen. And the other one is not one of my tips, actually, is a lady called Melissa Tears from New York, New Jersey. And people that know her, she swears like a trooper and all sorts of other things, but a brilliant therapist. And her one particularly is for newbies where they're worried about perhaps getting a script in the wrong place or in the wrong order, or doing things in the wrong order, or missing bits out. And her phrase, which I always love, is she says, "Remember, people, we just make this shit up."
That is so true. The ability to go with the flow, to adapt. I mean, it's human, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the client's got no idea whether what you're doing is right and what you intended. So it doesn't matter.
Exactly. That's why working with therapists is a whole new ball game. But that's a whole different set of advice because they're constantly analyzing. Anyway, I'm sure we've all been there with people that have worked with us. So thank you so much, Garry. We're super looking forward to having you at Hypno LA. For those of you who haven't bought your tickets, the link's going to be below. Meet Garry, meet all the great people. It's going to be fun of knowledge. It's going to be practical, hands-on. And yeah, it's really about getting that experience all together. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you again, Garry. And always, we'll catch you soon.
See you in LA.